Welcome, gardeners. I am Pooja from Long Beach. You are watching the Urban Gardeners channel. Now let's get growing.
All right, welcome gardeners to your weekly gardening livecast, the Let's Get Growing live show here on the Urban Gardener channel. And I'm Enoch, I'm your host for today. And this week we have a really great show for you. We have our featured guest, Karen Hugg, the author of Leave Your Troubles Behind. We'll have her a little bit later on. And we are following Katie of the Homesteading RD for our Instagram segment today. So please stay tuned for these really great guests coming up here in a little bit on the show. Now, if you are here with us today, please get into our chat box and leave us some comments or questions that we can talk about here in just a little bit later on in the show. And also, be sure to give this show a big thumbs up, hit that like button. Also, click the subscribe button so you can follow along with us here on the Urban Gardener channel. And be a friend, tell a friend, share our show with all of your garden friends out there and your garden groups and everything. And let everybody know what we got growing on here on the Urban Gardener Let's Get Growing live cast. Now, also, I do want to encourage you to go and check out our website at letsgetgrowing.live and go check out all the different things that we have there. You can check out our future and past shows. You can check out all the different things with our different segments and all of that. Plus, down at the bottom of the page, you can sign up for our seasonal newsletter. And then we'll have one of those coming up here real quick in a couple of weeks and everything. So be sure to sign up for all of that there. And this last week's question of the week. I just want to kind of go over that with you all here at the top of the show. What is your favorite fruit tree? So if you are here with us right now, get in the comments section there. Let us know what your favorite fruit tree is, and we'll talk about that here a little bit later in the show, as well as talk about next week's gardening question that we'll have as well too. So it's great to have all of you here with us today. And just to go over a little bit of what I've been growing and doing in the gardens. Our weather has finally kind of improved a little bit. We're still getting some kind of cold nights, but we're starting to get some sunny days and some warm days. So it's really, nice when the weather starts getting nicer so we can, it gives us a little more encouragement to get out into the garden. And that's kind of what I've been doing this last week. I've been working on all sorts of stuff around the house here, as well as my garden that we have over at my friend's place. Again, we have like these big 20 by 40-foot plots that we dug out of his big front corner lot that he has at his house. And so we really got to work this week and made sure all the plots are ready, and we've been planting out all sorts of stuff from potatoes to onions, peas. We're getting carrots in, all sorts of stuff. We already have a whole bunch of garlic that's already popping up from what we planted this last fall. So it's looking really nice. The whole space is looking really good. And again, as well around here as well too. I've been working on all sorts of stuff. So that's one of the things about spring that's just really awesome, is to just really be able to get out there and start growing, because as gardeners, we're looking forward to this all winter long. We're kind of, especially here where I live, we just get some really nice cold winters, and it's just something that we're really looking forward to, when all the cold kind of subsides and we can get out into the garden and get all the things growing that we want to get growing in our garden. So it's been an awesome week as far as all of that goes. Been able to do a little bit here and there in the weeks past, but this last week was just full on gardening, and it was just really exciting to be able to get that going. So I hope that all of you have been able to get out in your gardens as well. And, again, there's a good reason to get into the chat box. Get into the chat box there. Let us know what you've been growing. Or if you are watching us on the replay, get down into our comments section below. I'd love to hear about all the things that you've got growing on in your garden as well, too. And if you're listening to us on our podcast, you can, leave us some comments and everything, too, in our Facebook gardening group that we have, the Let's Get Growing group. So we'll talk about that also here in just a little bit, too. So I think it's a good time that we go check in with our friend Mark in the garden.
Hey guys, you're in the garden with MBC. I'm here out at the school I teach at, Franciscan Montessori Earth School. And today I want to talk about potting on, plastic pots, and alternatives. So it's that time of the year when lots of things are going in pots or have already gone in pots. I just potted up all my tomatoes, hundreds of tomatoes. I'm potting up peppers right now, doing all kinds of stuff in pots. It's still too cold. Finally, I can point to some blue sky. Right, I think I've been highlighting gray over the last few weeks, but finally we're getting some blue sky. But it's still too cold. It's still we're getting wintry temperatures at night here in the Pacific Northwest, and that's not going to change for a little while. So this stuff has just got to be potted up, potted on. And then there's just other things that we're just beginning. I'm starting some summer flowers right now. We're going to be looking at squashes and cukes real soon, the next week or two. So just pots are on my mind. And you know what? These things are literally garbage. I use a lot of plastic pots. I have a lot of plastic pots, but I'm trying to get away from them. I know, just like you, that this stuff is destined to last way too long. It's going to break down into microplastics. It's going to be ingested by organisms. That's not good. I mean, people, we are gardeners. We're trying to work with the earth process, not against it, right? So when we can, I know this is convenient, and I'm not here as a morally perfect person. I'm still using plastic, but I'm trying to steer away from it. So here, let's talk about some alternatives, and I think you'll find these really fun and creative. I mean, this is a coconut fiber pot. That's a great alternative, but it still involves materials being shipped around the world. Last time I checked, I didn't see any coconuts growing in my backyard or anywhere nearby. These are convenient. They are biodegradable, of course, so that's an advantage. You still need to buy them, so they're expensive. I haven't made my own coconut pots last time I checked, and sometimes the supply runs short, so you don't always have the thing that you want because you can't produce it yourself. So let's look at soil blocks as an alternative, and then hopefully at the end I'm going to kind of give you a mind blow and show you that you don't need these things. But these are soil blockers, okay? These are 2-size soil blockers. This is a 4-block model, and this is like the 1 big block model. So I'm going to show you how to make these and how to get a little bit liberated from the plastic pot thing. So to make soil blocks, the whole idea behind a soil block is you're creating a compressed, free form block of soil that will essentially, the fibers in your potting mix, whatever they happen to be, peat, moss, coconut fiber, various wood products, bark and such, those fibers are going to kind of cling together as you compress them and squeeze the water out of the mix. And then when you plant a plant in there, as soon as the roots start to grow, the roots are going to do a lot of the work of holding that pot together. It will stay together though, and it's surprisingly sturdy on its own. I've let them go for months and months without planting anything in them, and they're still there and they're doing fine. They've gotten rained on and such, and most of them look pretty snappy still. So anyway, how do we do these things? Well, you're going to get your favorite potting mix. This is not my favorite potting mix, but the one I had on hand. It's one thing that's important is if you are using a potting mix that does not have coconut fiber, you will not want to be using your bare hands. In other words, if it has any kind of wood chip, bark chip, bark nuggets, ropey bark, any kind of bark products, I'm going to be wearing gloves because I've gotten so many tiny little splinters from that stuff, and it's so annoying. I mean, just kind of gets in your hands and you can't get rid of it. Anyway, coconut fiber is nice and soft. This is a blend of coconut fiber and pumice. It's got no other nutrition, but it is dry. That's why I'm using it, because my favorite potting mix is over here that I made, and it's a blend of coconut fiber, pumice, and earthworm castings. But we did some of this today, and the kids get it completely sopping wet. I mean, it is like a quicksand, a morass of quicksand over here. So I'm putting, you can see the sloppy gunk. You're going to, no matter what, you're going to add water to your mix. So I just don't want it quite so sloppy. I don't want it quite so runny. So I'm adding some of this stuff to get it a little bit drier. And I'm going to give you a test in just a minute to let you know. How do you know if you got it right? Well, here it comes. Just wait for it. Let me mix this up here. Okay, now here comes the test. I actually don't mind if it's a little bit wet. You can't have it too dry. And here's the test. You're going to want to be able to form a snowball out of it. See that? A snowball, basically. A soil ball is what I'm saying. Like as if you're making a snowball. And if you can toss it and have it stay intact when you catch it, if it goes to a million pieces, it's too dry. You're going to need to add more water. The electrostatic attraction of one water molecule to another is kind of what's holding this together. Water is partly the glue, but you should just be able to, and you know, if it's really good, you can toss it higher. But we're not here for a juggling show. We're here for a potting plant, a plasticless pot lesson. The other thing I have is a bucket of water, because every once in a while I'm just going to want to dip, and I should have a towel, but I don't. Oh yeah, I do. Here we go. There we go. So I have also got some trays that I'm going to be putting these things on. I'll put that right on top of that for right now. Okay, no, I can't do that. I'm going to put it right on top of this for right now. All right, I've got my 4-block soil form here. This I ordered from Johnny's Selected Seeds. A lot of places have this soil block maker. I tend to dip it in water first before I go plunging in. I think of that as like like you oil a cookie sheet. Okay, it's going to help the soil from really sticking completely in there. And then you're going to just get in there and pack the squares. Okay, you are going to just get in there and you're going to squeeze the soil down. You can also just kind of jam it into a bunch of soil and use a rocking and spinning motion until you hit the bottom. I've got a planting tray here, so I'm just kind of jamming this into a bunch of soil. But in the end, I'm just going to want to turn it upside down and make sure I packed it and smooth it off. Okay, now if I have a good mix, and you can even stick your thumb in each of these to make sure you've got it enough. If you don't, just fill in more and level it out. Okay, now I'm going to depress this top part while holding on to this bar, and watch what's going to pop out. I'm actually going to do it up here for visual effect. That was awesome, right? 4 amazing soil blocks. Here, let me do it again, and then I'll actually show them to you this time. Okay, so I'm packing the chambers here, and water's oozing out of the mix. That's okay, right? I just don't want it to be a total, like a mass of quicksand like it was over there. So I needed to just mix it with some dry potting mix. And again, if it starts falling apart and won't hold in there, that means you don't have enough water. All right, I'm going to compress these on this tray right now, and then I'll lift one up and show you. Okay, if you make them correctly, you get these beautiful little blocks. Check that out. It's got a cool little divot in there. You can see that there's a little nub in there that creates a divot. That's where your seed's going to go. And these nest really beautifully in the tray. So you just kind of stack them in the tray like so. See in there? Whoop. Oh man, they roll down. Don't, yeah, I'm filming here. This is not what I'd be doing normally. I'd just be stacking them in straight up. I pack in as many as I can. Sometimes I even use a spatula to lift some up from another tray and fill in the gaps. And then I'm just going to sow my seeds right into that, and then cover with a little either a very light potting mix like this stuff that I have, the coconut fiber, mainly coconut fiber and vermiculite, or some coconut fiber, or some something sifted that's very light and fine. All right, let's try it. Let's try the big boy now, because this is cool. When you run out of space, okay, so the big advantage of these when you plant them too is that the roots will only grow out to the surface of each cube and no further until it's in the soil. Then they're ready to go in every direction. They won't get root bound because they get what's called air pruned. The air stops the growth, the slight space in between each block. But what happens if your plant gets too big, like say a tomato or a pepper, and then it's too cold to still plant outside? There's a solution. You can pot up without potting up, without using a pot, by making the big block. Let's see if we can get a big block. This thing looks like a cowbell. And I feel like I'm off in Switzerland somewhere, but I'm not. I'm actually in Portland, Oregon. This one takes a lot of packing, I got to tell you, because you got to really get it down sides. As far as I recall, it's been years since I bought this big guy, but I think it cost me about $90. But it's a one-time investment. The materials are really super sturdy. And this one is great for doing large plants like squash, where I'm going to want to let them grow in the same pot for 3 or 4 weeks. So they're just going to grow right in here for 3 or 4 weeks. Then they're ready for the field. I'm going to do this one on the tray. Then I'm going to try to lift it up and show it to you. Hopefully it came out perfectly. Oh, it didn't. Okay, you know what I didn't do? I didn't dip it first. So, my bad. I'm going to dip it. Let's fill it. The other nice thing about these is if you don't do them right, boom, you just throw it back in the mix. No problem. So like I said, I'm really packing it down in the sides here. Packing it in there. Okay, let's try for success. And I got to show you one more thing before we sign off here. I got to... Oh yeah, that's a good one. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be able to lift this thing. Let's see, I got to take it real gently. It looks like kind of like a Mayan pyramid. It has a hole. Oh, it just broke apart, but that's all right. It has a hole the size of one of these blocks. So when this thing is too big for this little guy, you just slip it right in here. It nests right in perfectly. Tuck it in, and then it can start growing, and the roots can fill this whole larger block. All right, let me show you the final thing that I want to show you, because in the process of doing the snowball test, I was actually filming a class that I have online called The Things They Didn't Teach You in Garden School. That's on like Udemy and Skillshare if you care to look that up. But anyway, I was doing this snowball test and I was like, hold on a second. I'm doing this to figure out if this can fit in the forms. What if I don't need the forms? What if I just go with this? So I started to poke a hole. It took me a little while to get this technique down, but what I do is I start by poking a hole when it's just at a very loose form. Let me do that again. I'm taking this really wet, soppy soil. I'm just kind of loosely manipulating it in my hands, and it sort of takes the shape of a ball, but I haven't compressed it yet. It's very loose and flexible. I'm going to tap in a little hole. See that? Now what I do is I start to compress it in every direction, and I keep reinforcing the hole. If I don't make the hole early enough and I make it only after I've compressed it, the tapping will sort of break it apart. But if you do it correctly, you're going to get something that looks like a beautiful apple. It can be big or small. It's got a little hole in there. It's got a little divot just like the other ones. And you made this with the mold that you always have on hand. Literally, your hands. So you don't need a mold. These kind of go sit. They will flatten down a teeny little bit, and as you fill a tray in with them, even though they're spheres, they'll kind of find their position. So these are also great, but look at that. It's pretty sturdy because I'm moving it around. I can even toss it a little bit after it's been compressed. Anyway, why stay with plastic pots after you've discovered this? Yeah, it takes a little more time, but man, you have fun. This is what we did as kids, right? We played in the mud. Well, now you can play in the mud and you can get your crops ready. You can give them a nice home. Make these soil blocks, make these soil balls, have yourself a grand old time, and you're not contributing anything to the waste stream. Good for you. Thanks for being in the garden with MVC. We'll see you next time.
So, all right, another fun gardening segment with our friend Mark Richey Colbert. He was really having some fun there with that soil, playing in the mud, putting together some soil blocks. I love using soil blocks myself too, and exactly for what he was talking about, to be able to kind of cut down on all that plastic waste that we end up kind of uh, really building up, over the years of gardening and all of that too. So utilizing soil blocks is a really great way to get your start started in your garden. And be sure to go check out Mark Lachey Colbert on his Instagram at Urban Ag Solutions. So he's got so many things he loves to share. He's got a lot of great garden knowledge. So go follow him there. And now it's time to check in with our first guest on our Instagram segment. Are you following me?
Are you following me? Are you following me, dude?
This week we have with us Katie from the Homesteading RD. Katie is a homesteader who is obsessed with all things related to real food, self-sufficiency, and doing things the old-fashioned way. The Homesteading RD is a place where she can help guide people in a lifestyle that prevents health issues from occurring in the first place. It's in this space that she can help people learn how to grow their own food, develop healthy soil, raise animals the old fashioned way, and live a toxin free, simple life. Something beautiful happens when you slow down and find purpose in the little things. All right, let's welcome to the show Katie from the Homesteading RD. Hey, Katie, thanks for joining.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So awesome to have you here with us. All right, so let's dig in real quick. The Homesteading RD. What's the RD stand for?
Yeah, the RD stands for Registered Dietitian. So that is kind of how I started my professional career. And then it's really kind of morphed more recently over the last couple of years to really digging into more of the homesteading side of things. So it's been a really fun journey.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes. Awesome. So let's take a step back real quick and dig into your gardening story. Where does that start for you? When did you first get your first gardening experience?
Great question. So I am very much a self-taught gardener, a self-taught homesteader. So I was not raised homesteading or really growing much food. I did like a couple flowers growing up, but that was about it. So my first true gardening experience growing food and vegetables was in 2008. So when my husband and I had our first house, and just a small little house in Kansas City, and it was a really just basic start. And I love to share this story because so many people can get overwhelmed with, I need all these fancy raised beds and start all my plants from seed. And really all I did is I took a shovel and I turned over some sod and I just broke it up the best I could. I don't even think I added compost, and I put seeds directly in the soil, and it turned out great. Was it my best garden ever? No, but
Right.
I still got a lot of produce out of it. I probably only spent a total of $25, to get that whole garden started. And I just bought a gardening book and learned a little bit every year.
Just went right at it, huh?
Yep. Just get started. It's
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
evolved since then. So
Yeah, I think that's pretty close. I might have started just a year or two after you when it came to actually growing a food garden. And I've always kind of been into growing like house plants. I've always had plants around my home and all of that sort of thing since I was very young. But it was probably about 2009, 2010, and about that time when I was starting my first food garden with just a simple cucumber on a balcony, you know.
it's a great place to start. I love
Right.
that.
Yep. And so you got started there. Where did things kind of develop from there for you?
Yeah, so we spent a couple of years in that house, and I did end up planting a couple of fruit trees, and I had a grapevine growing up our fence. So I really tried to maximize as much as I could where we were at, but we quickly outgrew that house. And I'm from Minnesota originally, and thankfully my husband agreed to move back there with me. So we moved back and found a 5-acre homestead, which is what we're on now. And then at that point, that's when everything really blossomed. I was able to go with the bigger gardens and really start progressing into food preservation. And it's been really fun. And now trying to get as self-sufficient as possible.
That's great. That's really awesome. I wish I had that kind of space to be able to do those kind of things, but it's really fun to see all of you out there who are doing that, so I can keep dreaming and know what I'm doing when I get there, right?
Yeah, hopefully someday.
So in this gardening experience for you, I'm sure there are certain things that you've been growing that you really like. What are some of your favorite plants to grow in your garden?
I would say that my favorite plants to grow are anything in that brassica family. So like cabbage and broccoli and Brussels sprouts for several reasons. A, I love to eat them. They're delicious and they're just loaded full of amazing nutrition. The other thing is they're very cold hardy. And in Minnesota, where I'm now at, and I'm kind of in the central area of the state, so I'm zone 4A. We get a decent amount of cold weather, and our gardening season is really short. So I love that group because they not only tolerate the cold, they thrive in the cold. They taste better that way. They can tolerate the frost. So those are definitely a slam dunk in my book.
Yes, brassicas. Brassicas are my challenge, though.
Are
For me in
they?
my area, yeah. But still, like I say all the time on the show, is I'm determined to get them right. But it's great for you in those areas that you're able to do that. So you say you're in the 4A zone, right?
4A. So
Yeah,
yeah,
things are still pretty cold and pretty frozen right now.
they were up until a couple of days ago. It's been a very unique spring where it was very delayed. We still had 2 feet on the snow, on the ground of snow up until a few days ago. And then it turned to 80 degrees and it all melted in a matter of like 3 days. But now we're back to like 50s during the day, 20s at night. So we've leveled out, but the snow's gone now at least. So I can see my garden. It's tempting me. We'll get there. We still have about another month to go before we can plant.
Right. Yeah. It's tempting to get started though when the weather starts to warm up like that and give you those basically a little false spring, I guess is what we call it, right?
Definitely.
It's
Definitely.
like, oh, I want to get just get itching really bad. I want to get these plants out there. I want to get growing. But yeah, you got to hold off a little bit when you're in those type of zones where things can really just freeze right back up on you.
Absolutely. And being mindful of your soil temp as well. When that air temp is 80, it's like, oh, yeah, it's probably warm enough. But if you actually stick your finger in the soil, if you can, I think some of it's still pretty frozen solid. It's going to be too cold to plant for sure.
Yes, definitely. So brassicas being some of your favorites that you do really well with and everything. I'm sure that there's got to be some plants that present some difficulties or some challenges. What are some of those things that you try growing but challenge you each year?
Yeah, I would say I have a love-hate relationship with potatoes. I love growing them. I love eating them. I love harvesting them. It's like Christmas, digging them up. But my biggest challenge with those are the Colorado potato beetle. I get them quite heavily, even if, I'm doing crop rotations and doing my best. And I'm not a big fan of spraying my plants, even if it's an organic spray. So I'm a manual bug remover kind of gal. And it gets to be quite a lot of work sometimes. I'm out there every day going through the rows, picking them off. And they're kind of nasty creatures too. They're not very fun to manage, but it's what we do.
Yeah, so the potatoes because of the pests there for sure. I love growing potatoes, but for me, I just actually, as I was mentioning at the beginning of the show, we were out working on my friend's garden plots. We got these big 20-foot by 40-foot plots in his front yard right now.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things we did plant for the first time for me was planting potatoes in the ground. I've always, for years now, just for the fun of it, grown potatoes in containers. I've had good years, I've had off years, but one thing I've never had is having to deal with any potato beetles or any
You're
pests or anything
lucky.
to mess with them. But potatoes are fun to grow. Like you said, it's like Christmas digging them up. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things, especially with container potatoes, is how deceiving they can be in some way too.
Mm.
Because, I get these big, beautiful potato plants that grow up out of these containers and just get my hopes up. All these just, like I said, beautiful plants. And you never know what you're going to get until you actually dig it up. It's not one of those
Mm-hmm.
plants that you could just see what you're getting right off of the plant.
Yeah.
All the rewards are down below the soil, and you pull up some of these really cool plants and find that you only got a few little potatoes in there. It's kind of something. But I'm going to see what things are like when it comes to actually growing them in the ground, and hopefully those will work out really well.
Yeah, good luck. The other thing I had a problem with this year is we have a lot of pocket gophers, and one had made its
Oh.
tunnel all the way along one of my rows of potatoes and was just snacking its way all the way
Oh, my.
through. So those potatoes, they were tricky.
Oh.
So
Yeah, so even if your bugs aren't getting to them, you've got these gophers
underground.
getting it. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Maybe I need to move to containers.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you get a good sized container, I find that they actually work all right. I haven't really found any luck with smaller containers, but a good
Okay.
sized one I've
Good
found
to
pretty
know.
good. But
Awesome.
I don't know. I think from what I've heard and all of that, the potatoes actually do better in the ground.
I
But
think they do,
again,
probably.
if you don't have those pests trying to steal them away from you,
Right, exactly. There's always
yeah,
something.
there's always something, right? All right. So so you've been gardening and doing all this sort of stuff. What was kind of the next thing for you? I mean, you started did you start your Instagram, or was that something that kind of developed over some other things that you were learning?
Great question. So I've had my Instagram account, I don't know, maybe since 2016, and
Yeah.
I've posted little things about my homesteading, like things I'm up to, shots of the garden along the way. But I didn't actually start trying to make an effort at growing my Instagram account until about a year and a half ago. So fall of 2021, where
Nice.
I had finally left my hospital dietitian job
Yeah.
to make a transition into functional nutrition. So I was back to school, and ultimately I was just in my basement day after day learning online, and I really missed that education piece and connecting with people. And that's where the homesteading RD really was born. And I had all this extra time at home now, so I could really ramp up the growing piece and the homesteading piece and food preservation. So I just started just sharing really out of loneliness, and people really latched onto it and were wanting to learn. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. I'll just keep going. And then
Yeah.
I made a website, and that's been doing really well. And it's just been really fun to see it evolve and to see so many people excited about this. I've been
Yeah.
growing food, and I've been growing food for 15 years, homesteading for 10 years. And I always feel like I was kind of the odd duck. People would look at
Right.
me like, you enjoy doing that? Like, you'd rather just stay home and weed your garden than go out and do something.
Right.
And so it's really cool now to see so many people actually interested in it and valuing this way of life. So it's been awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And as you can tell with your Instagram, you got a really great following and all of that. That's kind of something to see in a short period of time, to be able to have
Yeah.
that type of growth and
I was
everything. So that's
not
really awesome.
expecting it. Very humbled by it, that's for sure.
Yes, that's really great. Yeah, I really like a lot of the stuff that you share on your Instagram for sure.
Thank you.
So let's see. Let's talk about some of those things that you are sharing on your Instagram. Let's see. We talked about in your bio, that you're showing people how to grow their own food, for one, as we've talked
Mm-hmm.
about there, but also, raising animals the
Mm-hmm.
old-fashioned way, as you say on your
Mm-hmm.
website. So, what kind of animals? What kind of things that we got featured on your homestead?
Great question. So I'm pretty basic as far as animals go. I don't have like the cows or the goats yet
Right.
anyways, but so
Yet,
right
right?
now, it's mostly chickens. So we have about a group of like 40 to 45 egg layers. And then we also do meat chickens. And so
Okay.
those guys are going to be arriving the end of May. And so those are my main animal outlets at this point, but I'm hoping that maybe in
Yeah.
future years it'll start expanding.
Yeah, definitely. Like I was saying, I always think about how awesome it would be to have kind of a big space like you have there and everything. And one of those first things I would do is chickens. I'm obsessed with chickens,
Absolutely.
but I live in the city and I don't really get the opportunity where I live
Mm.
and, to be able to have the chickens that I want. But someday, eventually, I'm going to get them because I would just love to have them around, just even if they're just running around and all of that would be great, let alone the
Yeah.
fact that you get the eggs and the meat down the road
Yep.
too, if you're growing those types of chickens as well too. So those are really great.
Yeah. And they're a really easy creature to get started with. They don't need much. You can still go on a weekend trip getaway, and they're pretty inexpensive. They're small and they're just
Yeah.
fun to have around. I think that was my biggest surprise moment when I first got chickens. I just got them for the eggs. And then
Yeah.
after they're around a while, I was like, oh, these guys are they're fun. They have great personalities. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just enjoy seeing them run around. And yeah.
Yeah. I follow a few people, through YouTube and who have chickens, and it's just really kind of fun to see their relationship with these little animals and all of that too. It's really great.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit, again, homesteading RDs, you're a
Mm-hmm.
registered dietitian. So kind of how do you incorporate that into your Instagram and the things that you share as well?
Yeah, great question. So I guess I don't, my Instagram account has evolved a lot over the years. So when I first started it, it was very nutrition heavy, like half nutrition, half growing food and food preservation. It has shifted a little bit to, not quite as heavy nutrition to mostly content, but I like to throw in a little nutrition flair. I'm a
Yeah,
big researcher and I love research studies. So especially if you go to any of my blog posts on my website, The Homesteading RD, I try to really provide really good evidence behind any claims that I'm making or,
yeah,
research behind something that I'm recommending. So you can always see that it's evidence-based. And then
yeah.
plus the experience side, I feel like that really brings it together kind of from both ends.
Yeah, and as you're saying though too in your bio as well, is to help guide people in a lifestyle that prevents health issues. And I'm sure that's just, diet's a big thing for people when it comes to health issues. So, you know,
Absolutely. And yeah, I think just looking at it from a very simplistic, totally upstream, like for example, where I used to work at the hospital was very downstream. So people already had chronic disease and all these issues. And so really being able to get upstream to help people prevent them in the first place by, eating good, high quality food, cooking from scratch. I think that's one of the
yeah,
best things that people can do. Time outside and getting fresh air and sunlight and activity and, getting good sleep. All of those
yeah,
things really make a huge impact in your quality of life and your health, so we can prevent those things from developing.
right.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, even though I may not be like coming out with really heavy nutrition info, it's in there, like it's rooted in that. You may not even know
Yeah.
you're doing these things, but you definitely are.
Yes, that's great. Yes, and that's one of the things I love, one of the things you mentioned there too that I love about gardening is that whole kind of like sense of mind, the kind of almost therapy that you get by being out in your garden, being outside, doing all that
Mhm.
sort of stuff. And so
Mhm.
just that in itself brings a big impact to your life for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, do you have any sort of future plans or anything that you're looking to do or looking forward to either this season or coming up for things that you're doing with whether it's your Instagram or your homestead or anything?
We actually have some really big changes coming. So after I left my job at the hospital in downtown and started working from home, and my husband also works from home, we realized, hey, we can live anywhere we want now. We don't have to stay, on this 5-acre homestead, like pretty close to the city. So we're actually
Right.
actively looking for a new homestead. We're
Yeah.
looking for like 200 plus acres so we can
Oh, wow.
really go for it. So it's going to be a lot of work, a lot of big changes. And that's where I'm hoping to really get into like greenhouse growing. So that's definitely going to open up the doors for me here with our short growing season, maybe
Yes.
hopefully incorporating more animals. So that's
Yeah.
definitely the big news coming in, and
Yeah.
dreading a little bit having to make all my gardens all over again, starting from scratch and
Right.
moving all the chickens, but I think it'll be
It'll be
worth it
great.
in the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah, especially with all that space and everything. Do you have any ideas of where you're looking at or where you'd like to go?
Yeah, so currently we're about like 45 minutes to an hour north of the Twin Cities area, and we're looking to go about one more hour north. So even a little bit colder than what we're currently used to.
Oh, okay.
So deep into the woods, basically. It's mostly just hunting country up there,
Oh, right on. Well, that'll
which
be
we
fun though.
want to get into. So being able to hunt off your own property, that definitely opens the doors for being more self-sufficient as well. So we're looking forward to it.
Right on. That's really cool. That'd be great to, again, have some bigger, larger spaces and be able to expand on some of these really cool successes and things that you've already got going on and all of that. So, last question for you. Do you have any advice or tips or anything like that that you'd like to share with any newer or even seasoned gardeners?
Yeah, my favorite tip is don't be afraid to fail forward. That's my favorite phrase, failing forward, because it's so easy to um, be nervous about getting started with something, knowing that, oh, am I going to do it right? Am I going to make mistakes? Is it all going to fail? Just jump in there, get started. You probably are going to fail, at some aspect of it, maybe the whole thing, but you're going to learn a lot from that experience and you can do even better the next time. Just take really good notes, and every year is going to be different too. I fail at something every single year. Like, for example, that pocket gopher eating all my potatoes last year, was a
Right.
first for me. But, we learn and tweak from there. The other tip of advice that I like to give is something that really helps me, because it can be really overwhelming in today's world. There's so much information out there that can also sometimes be paralyzing. You'll see all these different opinions and ways of
Mm-hmm.
doing things, or you can just get lost reading blog post after blog post and then just are
Yeah.
so tired by the end you don't want to do anything. So my tip
Yeah.
for success is find somebody that you trust and just read their one way of doing it, and then just do that and
Okay.
see how it goes. That is kind of my secret to success, because I'm a researcher and I get very lost to see reading all the different ways you can do it. And
Yeah.
I'm most efficient and just confident going into it. Just find one way and do that.
Yeah.
And finding someone who practices similar to you, or ideally is in your same growing location,
Yes.
is really, really
Yep.
helpful. And then you can know that, yeah, what they're recommending is probably also going to work for me.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's a good piece of advice, as if you're definitely just getting started. Like you said, there's
Mhm.
just so much information out there, and then,
Mhm.
things can just kind of, mass up, as far as how much, you're trying to deal with when you're just trying to grow one simple thing. And if you're
Mhm.
just kind of following one method or one person's advice just to get started, that'll get you going. You might find some successes, and then you
Mhm.
can just kind of build on that from there too, because gardening really doesn't have too many limitations when it
Mhm.
comes down to it. So, there's a lot that can be explored, but, finding those first initial successes are kind of the way to go.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
All right. Well, really awesome of you to join with us here on our show. It's just a great conversation. And I want everybody to go out and check out your Instagram at the Homesteading RD. Check out all of those great things that you're offering there on your page, and all of those future changes too. We'll look forward to seeing all of your new space and all the things that you get to
Yes.
contribute with us from your new home when you get that down too. So
It's
again,
going to be an
Katie,
adventure.
awesome. Again, Katie, thank you so much for joining with us.
Yes, thanks so much for having me, Enoch. Have a great day.
You got it. Thanks. All right. Yeah. What a nice, great conversation with Katie there from the Homesteading RD. And right now, let's jump right into our garden story segment. This week's garden story comes from our good friend and probably one of the very first subscribers to the Urban Gardener channel, Nancy Hood. And Nancy's garden story began when she was just little playing in the mud, sort of like what Mark was doing there in his earlier segment. Her dad wanted her to be more productive than making mud houses and squishing mud between her toes, so he gave her a packet of icicle radish seeds. She planted, cared for, waited, and finally the exciting day came where she pulled those white carrot-looking things from the soil, then washed them to try her first bite with a resounding, "Nope, not for me," much to her dad's amusement. I'm sure radishes are pretty surprising to a young kid. So when she grew up and went on to other things, and gardening was nowhere in her thoughts. One day her grandmother passed away and she was grieving. She felt prompted to take up gardening to help her cope with her loss. Her grandma had an amazing garden that she used to fill the root cellar that her grandpa had built. Everything grandma grew was so much better than what came from the grocery store. One slice of her grandma's tomato covered an entire piece of bread. Now, with the knowledge of her father and grandmother, Nancy has been gardening for many years. She uses the Ruth Stout method. The key is to have a consistent free source of organic mulch placed on top of the soil and maintained year-round. She gets hay when friends clean out their barns. She loves growing veggies to share, eat fresh, can, freeze, and dehydrate, and flowers for pollinators. A dear friend of hers once wrote, "Go to the garden, reflect there in peace. That is our place of calm, our place to make nature's food, our place to make soil, and a habitat for God's critters, butterflies, and chipmunks." Awesome. Great garden story again from Nancy Hood, who, like I said, was probably one of the very first subscribers to the Urban Gardener channel and has been following along with everything we've been growing on here and all of our fun garden adventures. So really great to be able to tell Nancy's little garden story here on our show and share that with all of you. Now, if you'd like to share your garden story with us, be sure to check out our website at letsgetgrowing.live, where you can click on the Get Involved tab up at the top of the page. Now, on the Get Involved page, we have a form for you to fill out where you can contribute your garden story, or maybe even do one of our audience introductions like Julia from Long Beach, California did for us today. So be sure to go check that out and come do some things and be on our show here with us this one in one of these upcoming weeks.
Ivy Organic brand products are innovative, organic, effective, and USA made products to help make this your best growing season. Hi, my name is Charles Malky, biologist and plant expert with Ivy Organics, where we grow cool plants and author Saving the World with the Home Garden. Ivy Organic brand products has a product for you, whether you be an organic orchard or a backyard grower that's trying to do things right. Ivy Organics has a product for you. Ivy Organic all-purpose fertilizers are unlike most fertilizers on the market in the sense that it has all 6 plant macronutrients. These are nutrients that plants need in abundance. Most people are just focused, and most people have only been trained to focus on the NPK, but Ivy Organic brand fertilizers deliver all 6 plant macronutrients, which include your nitrogen for your greening and growth, phosphorus for flowers and fruit, and also In the summertime, helps with the drought resistance of the plant. Potassium, important for root development, disease resistance. And then the other 3 macronutrients that Ivory Organic all-purpose fertilizers have include magnesium, which is the heart of the chlorophyll molecule, sulfur, important for the greening and the metabolic processes within the plant, and number 6, and actually about 1/3 of the plant's weight, is calcium.
All right, excellent. Let's get into a little bit of your questions here. And if you do have any more or any comments or anything like that, also be sure to get into our chat box over there and join the gardening conversation with everybody else here today. Let's see, we had a question from Jay Dixon. I'm about to direct sow, I'm sure, cool weather crops. Weather soil is about to go at nearly above freezing. Should I wait? All right. So again, too, when it comes to direct sowing or doing certain things, and you're talking about cool weather crops, my recommendation is if your soil is workable. Now, we kind of talked about in the last segment there with Katie about, where her soil is and looking for soil temperature. And that's really kind of important, for cool weather crops. They'll handle some, some really kind of cold or some freezes in that sort of sense, as long as they're not too heavy. But overall, if your soil is workable for cool weather crops, then you could probably go ahead and get them going. But if it's not, and you're still getting some pretty hard soil, or you can't dig down too far down, or if you can't, get a soil temperature, I think of what would be good, around 50 degrees or so would be pretty cool for cool weather crops. So if you can get the soil working and it's not too frozen, then yeah, go ahead and do that, get those in, especially for cool weather crops. But when it comes to the warm weather stuff, you're going to want to wait. And it's always best to just wait until your last frost date, as soon as that's ready or passed. Or, you can also to kind of judge, if you get a good weather report that's giving you a nice 10-day forecast, and your last frost date, like I think for us here is like May 15th, I think. So around May 5th, if I'm seeing in the weather that everything's looking good and we're not really going to have any overnight freezes or anything like that, then I'll go ahead and get maybe just a little bit of a jump start, and I'll get into planting things in as far as that goes when it comes to warm weather crops. But if it's cool weather stuff and you can work the soil, I'd go ahead and get going and get started if you want. Definitely. And then we had a question about what size containers do you use? And I think this is also referencing when I was talking about container potatoes in our last segment as well, too. I've tried growing potatoes in all different sizes of containers. I think that we even had some where I grew some potatoes out of a 5-gallon bucket that we have. And they're okay. They just, all the potatoes were really small, and I got a good, I did get an okay amount of them. But if you're looking for, good full size potatoes, you're going to want a larger container. And that's really kind of goes along with most any plants, like, tomatoes, and cucumbers, things like that I've grown out of containers. These plants, if you give them more space for the root space to grow, you're going to get better fruit. You're going to, especially with tomatoes, give them really some good root space, and you get those nice big juicy fruits off them. And that's similar with potatoes. So what I've used for containers are these big storage containers. So I get some of these big storage containers, either, I've gotten mine, where it's just kind of, from some friends that were done using them and they were going to throw them out. So I just, got them from them, and I drilled some holes in the bottom for drainage, and then we filled them up. And I've actually even like layered them in, for potatoes, they'll grow up from pretty deep into the soil too. So, I'll put in, in a storage container, maybe about 6 to 8 inches of soil, put a bunch of potatoes in, throw another 6 to 8 inches, put some more potatoes in, and then grow them in some layers to really get the best output out of those containers as far as potatoes go. Because I really like growing potatoes. They're fun, and kind of like what we talked about in that last segment is, they're kind of like, little Christmas gifts. You don't know what you're getting until you finally pull them up out of the containers and see all of those all of the reward of waiting for all of that time from your potato plants, and especially if you do also have small spaces and want to grow some. You could use they have bags out there. You can get grow bags and different things like that. But again, the larger the bag, the larger the container itself, probably the better you're going to get as far as getting a good harvest of those potatoes out of them too. So really great questions from everybody there. Please get into our chat box, join with the chat, maybe even ask some questions here of our guest coming up as well too. If you have any of those, we'll ask those during the interview. And let's talk about our question of the week. Our question of the week this week was, what is your favorite fruit tree? Now, my favorite fruit tree right now is my peach tree. And we grow all of our things are either in containers or elevated raised beds or in different, I've got these 5-gallon wicking pots and all of that. But all of our fruit trees are in some nice, big, large containers. And my favorite one right now is my peach tree. It's the one I've had now. I think we're going on our 4th season. And it took a couple of seasons for it to get growing. And as far as like container trees, it will take a couple of seasons. Even in-ground trees, you're going to wait a couple of seasons before you actually get some real good fruit production. But my peach tree right now is producing like crazy. There's flowers all over the tree right now blooming. So I'm really looking forward to my peach tree coming up. And Matt McGee says all of his citrus trees in containers. Matt has a Facebook group, growing citrus in containers. So I'm sure he's got lots of really good citrus. It's one of my favorites. I'd love to be able to grow citrus. I might try some lemons or maybe some more zone appropriate oranges if I can get some of those going here. It's something I'd love to do. Maybe I might even start this season and do that too, because I love citrus. It's probably would be one of my favorite fruit trees if I had it in my garden. And Sandra Gutner says, my El Dorado pear. Oh, that sounds good. I love pears. I do have a pear tree myself as well too, as well as CC Castaldo says fig. I love figs. Figs are so good. I never knew I would really like figs until I got older. I never really tried them before. And when I got to try my first fig, I just fell in love with those. I really do enjoy figs. Right, fresh and ripe off of the tree is the best. And Viola McShannon says her peach tree. Yes, peaches. I agree. Again, like I said, I love peaches, and my peach tree is doing so well this year. And Kyle Malden says, I like my fig tree. Kyle's a good friend of ours from the channel Growing Up Garden on YouTube. And I've been over to visit with them and to check out his cool fig tree that it got. So I don't know if he's got it in the ground yet, but he was growing it in this big, large box container. And it was really cool. And Lori Pyland says, my favorite fruit trees are plum trees. Oh, plums are really good too, getting those fresh off the tree. When I was growing up, we had this neighbor, this old gentleman across the street from us who had this big, giant plum tree. And we'd always be climbing up in his tree and getting all these delicious plums out of it every season. Luckily enough, he didn't chase us off. He had no problem with us taking the plums. And from our garden story, Nancy Hood says, I love apple, pear, peach, and apricot trees in my yard. Oops, that's more than one favorite, LOL. That's all right. We can have more than one favorite. All right. And Jay Dixon in the comments section says, favorite fruit tree is apple. Great variety. Very, very hardy. And yes, I love apples. In fact, that's probably what I have the most of in our container fruit trees. I think we've got three different varieties of apple. So yeah, I love the apple trees that we've got growing too. All right. Okay. Now next week's garden question is, what is your favorite garden book and why? What is your favorite garden book? So last week we had with us on the show um, author of the book How to Start a Community Garden, Lamanda Joy, with us, and I really enjoyed that book. And this week we also have an author with us, author of Leave Your Troubles Behind, Karen Hugg, and those are a couple of my favorite garden books right now. So I want to know, what is your favorite garden book and why? You can answer this question by joining us on our Facebook group, the Let's Get Growing Garden group on Facebook. You can find a link to that right down in the description below. So come join our gardening community here on the Urban Gardener at the Let's Get Growing Facebook group, where you can not only answer our question of the week, but you can also contribute some of your favorite garden stories, pictures. You can ask some questions or answer some questions that others might be asking in the group. Just be really fun to have you in our gardening community. Hey gardeners, thanks for tuning in to our show today. We'll be right back at it here in just a moment. I just wanted to take a second here to highlight our regular videos and features here on the Urban Gardener channel. Our weekly garden journals, and our incredible featured visits. So, all right, now it's time for our featured guest. This week's featured guest is Karen Hugg, author of the book Leave Your Troubles Behind. Karen is a green wellness designer, author, and professional gardener with over 25 years of experience. Her latest book, Leave Your Troubles Behind: How to De-Stress and Grow Happiness Through Plants, helps people relieve their stress by engaging with the joys of nature. With an MA, MFA, and certification in horticulture, Karen has contributed to the Washington Post, Wired, Thrive Global, and other national media outlets. She's been featured on the TV show New Day Northwest and as an expert source for Mind, Body, Green, and other magazines. Her thoughts on plants and mental health can be heard on multiple podcasts, including Brain Matters and New Books Network, as well as the Let's Get Growing show. Now, let's welcome Karen Hugg to the program.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, Karen. It's so great to have you. I've been really enjoying your book, so I've been looking forward to having you here on the show. Thanks for joining with us.
Yeah, you bet. Looking forward to it. I love your set, by the way. You've got music and plants together. Those are a good combination right there.
That's right. That's right. I love all my plants, that's for sure. So let's dig right into it. You are the author of this book, Leave Your Troubles Behind.
Yes.
And it's all about de-stressing and growing happiness through plants. It's one of the things I say too a lot, and I talk about on my channel and here on the show as well too, is that, you know, gardening has all of these great things that you can get from it. You know, all the cool plants, all the food that you get, all those sort of rewards. But I think the best reward is the kind of garden therapy that you get, you know. And there's a lot, like, you know, a lot going on in the world, and a lot of things, you know, whether or not we're working full-time jobs, or, you know, we've got family issues, or, you know, just the whole, you know, world itself. You know, maybe a lot of us are watching the news and things are just troubling all the time. You know, getting out into your garden and growing plants and doing that sort of thing can really be something that really helps us in our overall health. And you really wrote a great book about all of that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you've got in your book.
Sure. Yeah, gardening is great therapy. And, what's amazing is that a lot of studies show that, you can de-stress by like taking a walk and things like that. But when you walk in nature, you de-stress in like half the time. Like it's an amazing result that you get. So if you want to de-stress quickly, get into nature. That's like the most basic lesson that there is about that. And, just studies after study, show that it's not only great for your mental health, but your physical health too. Like, walking in a forest for, an hour, 3 times a week has been shown to boost your cancer fighting cells. So if you don't want cancer, take a walk in the woods on a regular basis. Like it can be that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one thing I was really enjoying about a lot of the content that's in this book is that you really fill it with, not just, the things that, that are issues when it comes to life in general, but you really give solutions. You have a lot of different like activities. So like each one of your chapters kind of ends with different types of activities that you could do to kind of do that sort of thing. Talk about some of the different of your favorite activities that you suggest in the book.
Well, one of my favorite activities, just because it's so much fun, because I like to hunt and go thrifting, hunting for old stuff. I mean,
right.
And I like to, I like to decorate with antiques and stuff like that. And so one of my favorite activities is to make a kind of a nerdy retro frame, a family frame that you put pictures of plants in. Those old frames where you had multiple little circles and ovals and squares for each one of your family members. You see them all the time on people's walls. And now you can find them in thrift stores for like, $3 or something. And so I think it's really a fun activity that even to do with kids is to take pictures of plants and frame little pictures of plants and put them in the nerdy frame and then put that on your wall so you can kind of keep track of what you're growing, or you can keep track of what you want to grow, or you can keep track of what you're learning about and really into, almost like a vision kind of a thing. So that's one activity that's kind of a home activity that families can do. There's a lot though. I mean, just one of the things I recommend in the book is like, just if you're in the office, go out to lunch and go sit in a public park and eat your lunch rather than sit at your desk and eat your lunch. Like just that 20 or 30 minutes in nature will go a long way in kind of restoring your attention, relaxing your heart rate, lowering your blood pressure and kind of, lowering your stress overall. So, but in terms, it's funny because I haven't thought about my activities in a little while, but the first one I have in the book is called a stress bramble, which I recommend for people who are really stressed out and feel like they're being pulled in all these different directions. And that's just basically a mind map of all your stress. And so it's kind of like you draw a leaf and you put the source of stress, like work, home, whatever, in that leaf, and then like vines, you connect it to another leaf that you just brainstorm about what your stress is. So you can basically get all of your stress out on paper so you can assess it, look at it, and then find ways to neutralize it. So that's just like one. There's some journaling exercises in there. There's some family activities. What else is there? There's like there's how to throw a plant swap party. We gardeners have so many leftover pots and, cuttings and starts and, whatever sprouted beans that we're not going to grow. Why not? Like if you live in an apartment building, you can go in the lobby and just have a plant swap party where you put out your pots and your old trowels and your plants and whatever house plants you're looking to exchange, and then meet your neighbors. And then you get that social energy while you're talking plants and while you're, learning about plants and having fun with it.
Yeah. That's actually one of the ones I bookmarked in here too. It's like one of my favorites. I was like, I really like that idea, being able to also, find some of those people in your local area too, who are just as plant nerdy as you are. It's really good to get together with people who have those similar interests and everything, and to be able to do something like that as a plant swap party, I thought was a really great one too. And one of the other ones I really like too, that I actually implemented myself, was, kind of like the first thing you do in the day. You're waking up. So one
Oh,
of the things you should do is put a plant right there. So the first thing you're waking up to is a plant right off the bat too. And I really like that. So I got one set up right in my bedroom, right there on the nightstand, ready to go. So when I wake up, I turn over and look, and there's a plant just to get my day started.
exactly. Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that one. That one slipped my mind, but I get a lot of comments about that activity. And that is part of the gratitude. I think I call it like a gratitude plant or something, where
Right.
so before you go to bed at night, you just keep a little Post-it pad by your bed and a pen, and you write down on each, maybe you could do one or you could do multiple, whatever you want, but write down a little phrase or sentence about what you're grateful for that day. And then
Yeah.
put it on the pot, on your plant by your bedside. So when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you see is what you're grateful for,
Yes.
from the previous day. And so it will kind of feed your mind in a way that looking at your phone just can't. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
that's right.
yeah, so that I think it's a really healthy thing. I keep one by my bed, and if you don't have a window by your bed, you can always put a little grow bulb in like one of
Mhm.
those little, arm,
Yeah.
lamps, and put
I
it over
actually have
your.
one that hangs on kind of a chain. So I have one that goes right on top, goes right up above it.
Yeah.
And yep. And also it makes for a good alarm clock too. When that light, I have it on a timer. So when that light pops on, it's time to get up.
Oh, nice one. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And I got the noise of an alarm clock, beeping at me. I just got a light saying, hey, it's time to get up.
Yeah. Simulating the sun.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So one of the things that your book talks about throughout the book too are what you have is the 7 strategies of green leisure. You want to talk about some of those 7 strategies?
Yeah. So when I was researching the book, I found over and over again that happiness researchers have found that there are about 7 things that make us happy, 7 activities, I should say. And they are learning, experiencing, like through the senses, idly playing, supporting another life, uniting with others, like uniting with like minded people, recognizing what you have, and then exercise. So when you can do one or more of those activities, per week, let's say, you will be happier. If you can do those activities as they relate to nature, your happiness will skyrocket. So basically, I use those words because those words I found spelled leisure. They didn't
Yeah,
spell work. They didn't spell labor. They spelled leisure. And
yeah,
so one thing I really believe strongly in is people working less and relaxing more, because
yeah,
Americans are such hardworking people. And that's wonderful. But we don't take our vacation time like we should. And we don't unplug like we should. We're very
yeah,
plugged into screens. We're very indoor people, which has its purpose, certainly. But um, if we can apply the principles of happiness to plants, studies show that we will maintain our mental health much better. So, there's so much talk about social media and how social media is changing and stuff. But to be honest, I can't help but think that the next big thing is nature and the
yeah,
outdoors,
yeah. I
because
really
it was our
agree.
first home, and that's what we crave
Hmm.
in a way. You know what I mean? Like we get
Yep.
depressed because we're disconnected from it a lot of the time.
Yes, that's true. So true. And also for you too, you were one of those people who was working all the time. You used to work in the tech industry, right?
Yes, I did.
So,
Let's just say I worked for the biggest online retailer that you might know
okay.
of.
Okay.
And I was
Nice.
so filled with, you know, I get hundreds of emails every day. I had hundreds of tasks, all these different people to talk to. My mind was just jammed with stuff. And I
Mhm.
was sitting all the time. I was staring at a screen all the time. I like lived in this little white screen, you know?
Yeah,
And
right.
um, but kind of instinctually, I always used to go home and I used to kind of garden at home and read about plants and read about gardening and I realized it was much later, many years later, that I realized, oh, I'm trying to soothe myself. I'm trying to self-medicate
Yeah.
with plants. I'm
Mhm.
trying to recover here from this.
Yeah.
And it worked basically.
Yeah.
And it worked so much that I ended up going to horticulture school and, becoming a professional gardener. And I never looked back,
Yeah. What a great change too, and like you said, and I worked in a industry that was really stressful for a long time too, and found that same sort of situation as I picked up kind of at the beginning a hobby of gardening. That's how it kind of started out. I started with a few different things and was growing, and it was the more I saw that same sort of thing you're talking about, I was just kind of learning on my own about de-stressing in my garden and what I was doing. And you just get to notice some of those changes in yourself, some of those changes that are happening while you're out in the garden, while you're working with these plants and all of that. It's easy to kind of understand kind of that point you were just making about that's kind of one of the next things we're heading to, is more and more people are able, through even social media, as it kind of works in a sense, for people to recognize or hear more about people like yourself and books that you're writing, to, get out into the garden and to discover this for yourself. And those remedies that you get by being outside, by digging in the soil and all that sort of stuff, just really, and what it does for us when it relieves us from our jobs and our stress and our, even if you're not working those big full-time jobs, or working for some of these stressful situations, we might have family issues, or again, as we mentioned earlier too, we might be plugged into the news a little too much and hearing about what's going on in the world and all of that, and those things can be really stressful when it comes down to it. And to be able to recognize what being outdoors and being around plants can do for us is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I always joke that I fell in love with gardening because plants don't talk back.
Yeah.
There's no meetings with plants,
Yeah.
Plants aren't going to betray you. Plants aren't going to gossip about you. Plants aren't going to, you know what I mean? They're just so
Yep.
honest and they just do what they need to do in a very authentic way. And I love that about them, And
Yeah.
like when you're out in the garden, there's so many things that gardening combines. It combines creativity, exercise, just creating something that wasn't there previously. You can
Yeah.
literally build something when you're gardening. There's so much to learn about gardening. There's so many plants to learn about and so many ins and outs of it to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, let me see here. One of my favorite paragraphs that I got here, I'm just going to read from your book. What I
Sure.
love about the natural world is that there's so much to learn and so much to imagine. It's endless. For instance, I've been involved with gardening for almost 25 years now, but there's lots I don't know. I discover new stuff every day, new plant cultivars, new design approaches, new products, even existing plants I wasn't familiar with. There's a ton of fascinating information and images out there, and most of it isn't political or complex or underhanded or intense. It's just the natural world waiting to be discovered.
Mm. Yeah.
loved that one. When I read that, I was like, that's it, that's it, when it comes down to it, learning, there's so much to learn in the garden, you get some of those first experiences, but then you just discover new things. Again, like I say, new plants, new ways of growing those plants, and all that sort of stuff. And then we can really build kind of, I mean, in my case, a real obsession for gardening and growing, but
Yeah.
there's so much to be discovered in the growing world.
Definitely, it's endless. Like I said, I mean, it's true. I've been doing this since, like the late 90s, and I still don't know everything. I mean,
Yeah.
like I'll go to Hawaii and I'll just be like, oh my God, what is that? What is that plant? It's so cool, I mean, I still get a buzz. I still get a charge from exploring gardening and plants. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, especially, I mean, you talk about Hawaii, you get into some of those other like tropical zones and all those just beautiful, awesome plants they can grow. Gosh, I wish I could do that myself, but it's great to be able to discover those sort of things. And again, just having that constant learning. Again, like you said, gardeners who I've talked to who've been gardening, they're, for many years, yourself 25 years. We talked with Gardner Scott, a few weeks back ago, and he's got, a good 40 years of it, and we talked about the same sort of thing that, that you're constantly learning. I don't think you can ever learn everything when it comes down to it. There's no real, final graduation in the sense of growing and that sort of stuff. And I kind of always say that if you're not learning, you're not really gardening. You're always there's always something more to get. And I think that's one of the things that's really great about it is it offers so much. It's endless when it comes down to it. So you get endless therapy, you get endless de-stressing, you get endless all of that by just getting out there and learning about growing plants, and you get so many rewards. And then again, too, as I say, too, you grow all these things and then you get tomatoes. So how about how good can that be?
I know, you
Right?
get food.
You get the food, you get the
and I mean,
the fruits of your labor.
yeah, and you get exercise. I have a piece in the book about how after I had that tech job and I was pretty soft, let's just say, and I started
Right.
gardening, and just by crisscrossing my yard and just
Yeah.
taking thousands of steps and carrying stuff and squatting and doing all this stuff, I ended up losing weight and getting stronger. Like there's
Yeah.
just there's just really no downside to it. You know what I mean? I mean, you have to be
Right.
careful that you don't overdo it. But
Yeah.
I mean, overall, it's an amazing thing. I mean, I just finished an article that's going to come out in the on a website called Shondaland about how gardening is like the ultimate exercise. It combines all these different movements that fitness people recommend. So squatting, digging, stretching, all of these movements that fitness experts have you do at the gym. Well, you do them naturally in a garden.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how cool is that? Plus you get the
Yeah.
sensory experience of like smelling, a rose or whatever, smelling beautiful plants and seeing beautiful plants and
Yeah.
all that stuff, hearing the birds and things like that. So
Exactly. I saw a post online once where it said my exercise equipment, and it was basically a bunch of gardening equipment like hose and shovels and these sort of things.
yeah.
You don't need the big treadmills and the weight bench and all of that.
Right.
You can get all of that through gardening and growing things too. That's really awesome.
Yeah, you just need a heavy bag of compost.
Yep. Lifting those bags of compost, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
Digging and shoveling, you just
Right.
you got again, you're getting all those movements in,
Yep.
getting all that exercise. Yeah, again, so much that gardening and growing really offers for you out there, whether it's again exercise, de-stressing, growing, food and all that sort of stuff is really awesome. So let's do one of the things I love to do here on the show is talk a little bit about people's gardening stories. So let's kind of take a step back a little bit and let's talk a bit about what and how you got started in gardening. What were some of those first gardening experiences for you?
Well, and I talk about this in the book. My biggest gardening experience was um, just discovering a butterfly bush, which, is a very, very simple, shrub. In fact, and I know that it's considered, the straight species is considered a weed in some parts of the country. So I understand that, but I kind of fell in love with this. Like I said, when I was working, and I had when I was overworked in tech, and I would come home at night and I would look at these. We had just bought a little house with this very pathetic backyard, and I would look in the catalogs like Burpee or White Flower Farm. The catalogs you kind of get once you own a house, and I would page through them, and I saw this picture that said, the little ad said, draw butterflies to attract butterflies to your garden. And I thought, what? Like, no way. This is like, you're saying I can actually like manipulate nature with a plant? Like, no way. Like, I grew up in Chicago. Okay. So I mean,
Yeah.
my mom grew a little bit of tomatoes, but that was it. We had a short growing season, and, it just wasn't part of my life. And I just couldn't believe it. And I just thought, okay, all right, well, we'll see. But I want to do that. Yeah, I want butterflies in a garden. I definitely want to. So I ended up buying one. It was Black Knight, which is, that really dark purple species. Species or cultivar, I guess I should say. And I planted it, and butterflies came. And I couldn't believe it. I was just like, what? This works. Are you kidding me? This is the coolest thing ever. So,
Yeah.
and then like we talked about earlier, when I realized that as I started caring for that plant, everything dropped, all the stress from the day dropped away. It was just
Yeah.
me and that plant. And I would see it from my kitchen window, which kind of made me happy. And then like after work, I would go out and water it and check on it and, cut off the dead blossoms and that type of thing. And that feeling of sort of like peace and
Mhm.
just sort of like, no, like I didn't have angst,
Yeah.
I had like a zen feeling of relaxation when I was with it.
Mhm.
That I got addicted to that feeling. And so then I just started basically ordering more plants and experimenting, like Katie was talking about earlier, just kind of failing forward and trying
Yeah.
this, trying that plant, seeing what survived, reading up more about my zone, which is in zone 8 in Seattle, and learning all I could. And I realized too that learning about them, like just reading gardening magazines in bed at night, made me sleepy because they relaxed me. So I ended up leaving, the tech job and going to horticulture school. And once I learned about plants, the more I learned about plants, the more I respected plants, the more I fell in
Yeah.
love with them, and the more I realized that they are incredibly delicate and incredibly resilient. Like,
Yes.
it's amazing. It's amazing. And also now, just how they do what they need to do, whether you're there or not. Like if the apocalypse came and we were all wiped out, plants would
Yeah.
be just fine. They would be
Yeah.
just fine, They just do what they need to do. And so I just kind of like, my passion only grew deeper. And then I ended up going off and starting my own little gardening business. And once I did that, I was just busy as all get out. It just took off
Yeah.
from there, and I never looked back. So
Yeah, it's kind of, for some of us, it's kind of amazing where, that kind of initial passion for gardening takes us down the road. I would never have thought that, when I first started growing my first gardens, that someday I'd be hosting my own gardening show here on YouTube and all of that, and all the things that have come in between and everything too. So, gardening can give you lots of different gifts. And again, too, kind of can't express it enough is, that overall feeling you get from growing and gardening, and that's one of the real reasons why, I was looking forward to having you on the show, was to kind of talk about some of this stuff, because it was really one of those things when I first started growing my garden. I was dealing with not just, work stress, but a lot of family stress, a lot of world stress, a lot of these stressors. And I didn't get into gardening thinking that any of that stuff was going to, that gardening was going to be helpful for those sort of things. It was something that I just found that was like, when I was out in the garden growing stuff, just as you were talking about, I just started noticing that, all these stresses were kind of lifting away. I'm digging in the soil, I'm planting out some plants, or I'm pruning something, weeding, doing these sort of things. And I kind of get lost in that world, and it becomes, again, sort of like you're saying too, a serenity space, a
Mm-hmm.
place where we can just really kind of relax our mind from all of these things that are going on. And that's, I think, what really, really pushed my passion for gardening. I was enjoying a lot of the aspects of it, learning and all these sort of things. But when you found that it was doing that for me, I was like, you know what? I need more of that.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and it still continues for me to be that refuge,
Hmm.
I mean, I have 3 kids, and thankfully they're all now a little older, but,
Right.
when they were young, my life was crazy, and one of them is a special needs, child, and, that can be very challenging, and I love her to death,
Right.
and she's great, but, I mean,
Right.
our life was chaos. We had
Right.
3 kids and 2 dogs and 2 cats, and I mean, we used to say, my husband and I used to say, we have 9 souls that we have to keep alive in this house.
Right.
And with school and work and lessons and, activities and all that stuff, and the cat getting ill and throwing up. And, I mean, like, there's so many things that, are
Hmm.
stressful in life. And the political climate was not lined
Right.
up with my politics at the time. And I felt very, you know, I don't know, just I took a lot of that on too.
Yeah. It's
But
kind of
when I,
amazing how we take those sort of things on, as well as our own personal life. We take
yeah,
the rest of the world on as well too, which is
yeah,
good. And it's good in some ways to be active in a little bit, but again, it could be such a heavy stressor.
exactly. Yeah. And, that's during that time, my husband used to take the kids every Saturday morning to the playground so I could work in the garden. And that
Yeah.
was like, it was like going to church. Like that was the feeling that I got from it. 3 hours of just, like you said, just tidying up, doing whatever. The,
Hmm.
the great thing is that you can actually see the results too. It's not an
Yeah.
ethereal thing like something online, which goes away. You see it every day. If you plant a Daphne, you're going to smell and see that Daphne every day, by
Yeah.
your front door or whatever. And when the kids came home, I felt ready to take things on again. I
Yeah.
felt okay, I can deal with this again now. It was
Yeah.
almost like this medicine that I needed on a
Yeah.
regular basis.
Exactly. And I think, again, too, going back to the book too, I think there was one part where you talked about, having that kind of space just to kind of relax in, you know. So, like you were talking about there, you do the things during the day, kids come home, things start kicking back in or whatever. But then, when they get to bed or whatever, then you can kind of just go out and relax in this space and just kind of relieve yourself from your day and all of that too. Again, as I guess I said too, kind of a serenity space, when you have a
Exactly.
nice garden, and then setting those things up purposefully though too is another big thing just for that.
Yeah, and that's one thing I want to say is, a lot of people live in apartments and they don't have an outdoor space. And one of the things I wanted to do with Leave Your Troubles was to address that. And
Yeah.
that's why I have a section towards the end of the book about creating a green leisure lounge.
Yeah, that's what it
Creating
is. Yeah.
and that's what I'm doing more and more with other people is I'm doing interior green sanctuary design with houseplants. And, you know, to have a sacred space where you can go and just, you know, lower the stress or get rid of the stress from the day is really important. And plants are a big part of that, even if it's inside. And it doesn't have to be a lot of plants. You don't have to go crazy like you or I would. You know,
right. Yeah.
3 plants. It doesn't even, you know, you don't. And also another thing I wanted to mention, and I talk about this in the book, is that if you are physically challenged or you don't have enough time, you can use fake plants to give you the same mental health benefits as live plants.
Yeah.
And you don't get the full benefits. You know,
Right.
you don't get the smell of a jasmine or a gardenia or something, but you can use just seeing plants in your sight line. Even in our peripheral vision, studies show that it lowers stress and helps us recover faster from stress. So even using fake plants inside your house is beneficial. So
Yeah, I could see that too. You know, just the idea of seeing green things just kind of puts in your mind that it's, you know, even if it's not living, I don't know. I think there might be something psychologically that just kind of, you know, connects the idea of living things and that sort of thing too. So kind of boosts those sort of mental energies.
yes, exactly. I mean, nature was our first home, so we are instinctually wired to be in nature. So when we see nature, it relaxes us. It makes us happy. It doesn't make us agitated, you know?
Yeah. So you've been gardening and growing things for we mentioned too about 25 years and all of that. So you've got a lot of growing and gardening experience. So what are some of those favorite plants that you like to grow in your garden?
Whew. Well, God, there's so many, right? Like, how do you answer that? You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like,
right.
it's just so many plants are so cool. But I guess I was trying to think about plants that are you know, a lot of people can grow across the US because in Seattle we're actually blessed, or the Northwest. You're in the Northwest too, right? So
Southern Oregon. So yeah,
yeah, oh, and see, it's even
just
better.
right in the edge of it.
Yeah, it's even better from you. We're right there on like kind of the cusp of California weather and
Yep.
Northwest weather. But
Yeah.
so I guess well, one plant that almost anyone in the United States can grow is Spirea magic carpet. Um,
Yeah.
I tend towards ornamental plants just because that's what I studied and I loved, and I'm a designer, so I'm kind of, you know,
Yeah.
partial to creating art kind of through plants, so to speak,
Yeah.
in a design. But I love magic carpet because that's, I think, hardy to zone 3,
Okay.
and it leaves out in these orangey yellow leaves, and it's mounded, so it grows in a very nice kind of tufted, behaved way. It
Yeah.
doesn't need very much pruning. It blooms in pretty, you know, kind of dark pink flowers that
Hmm.
contrast with the foliage beautifully, and butterflies like it.
Yeah.
And it won't get, if you plant it in, you know, full sun to part sun, it will never get any disease, and you never have to prune it. I mean, outside if
Oh,
you want to
nice.
deadhead it or shape it kind of,
Right.
but it's just sort of like one of those plants you can, you know, just plant and not worry that much about. It's also can be very drought tolerant. Um, and it will get sometimes it will get like pretty fall color. So
Okay.
I love that as an all around shrub, you know.
Yeah.
And then I'm partial to fragrant plants. I love, you know, things like Daphne odora, Oreo marginata, which is a variegated Daphne that has
Yeah.
really strong smelling sweet flowers.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
I love those, and I'm a big advocate as a designer of planting plants that you can smell by your front door or wherever you enter your house. So that
Yeah.
every day when you go from your car to your house, you have a little mini experience of having that sweet smell hit you when you're not planning on it,
Yeah.
right? You know, the
Yep.
surprise, you know, of a scented plant can be so much fun. Um,
Yeah.
So, I mean, but honestly, I could go on forever, but, you know, I mean, like those are two of my favorites. A beauty berry, a Calicarpa bodinieri, which has those iridescent purple berries in late
Okay.
when nothing else is blooming and everything's kind of brown and just twigs. You see
Yeah.
purple berries and they're so beautiful and they just brighten your day, you know?
Oh, yes. Those are some awesome plants. Just a little side while you're talking about fragrant plants. Right now I have a corn plant. It's an indoor plant, but it's a corn plant. And I don't know if you've ever gotten to experience a corn plant flower.
No.
I've been lucky enough to get 2 flowers this
Really?
year, and then about 2 years ago, come on, and it's just actually just right here.
So when you say
And
corn plant, you're talking Dracaena, right?
yeah,
Like
Dracaena
small
fragrans is what
stalks.
it's called. Yeah, and there's a reason why it's called Dracaena fragrans too, is because
Uh,
it's these flowers are some of the most amazing smell and fragrance you'll ever experience in any of your indoor plants.
oh my
And
God.
it's such a heavy fragrance too.
Yeah.
Like I mean, if you leave your doors open, your
Yeah.
neighbors will be smelling this as it wafts itself through your neighborhood. You walk in the door, and the only real problem is that it's kind of rare for them to actual flower. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, it doesn't happen very often with your plants, and it really only lasts about a week or so. But it's one of the most amazing fragrances you'll ever have.
Oh my God. So what's your secret? How did you get it to bloom?
I don't know. You know, to tell you the truth, I think, it's like most plants are flowering because of stress.
Yeah.
Because they want to produce a seed.
Yeah.
They want to, they want to kind of do that. And I think that I just let this plant probably dry out a bit much. That might have been the case. It's the only thing I can really think of that might have been the situation between this year and the last time it happened before, is that it kind of got dried out a little bit. So maybe it was just kind of stressing from not having that. So it's trying to pump up the flower. Yeah. So I mean, that's the only thing I can really think of. But yeah, it's amazing. If you ever have ever get to see one or experience one, you'll definitely never forget it. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's really cool. You know, speaking of that, I have a rattlesnake plant, which is one of those plants that has kind of like maroon or purple undersides, and then it's got like
Yeah.
green and light green variegation up the leaves. And I've had that thing for years, and all of a sudden, just a few days ago, I saw a little white flower pop up at the bottom,
Oh,
and
nice.
it grows apparently like it's a basil flower. Like it grows from the base of the plant up,
Yeah.
just boop, popped up, little white flower, actually big white flower. And I was like, where did you come from? You know?
Right? Yeah. I love
That's
those.
another way of gardening, right? Is when they bloom and you don't expect them to, and you're like, oh, hello, friend, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I have a transcendentia too that actually has been producing flowers off of it that I've been surprised about as well too. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and they
Those
got these
little ones.
neat little tiny little flowers that come up off of them.
Yeah.
Pretty neat. I love it. But yeah,
Oh,
again, that's
cool.
just one of those great little surprises that you get in your plants and all of that.
Yeah.
So we've talked about favorite plants. I'm sure that you've got some least favorite plants. I mean, things that either you just don't really care for growing, or just present too much of a problem or difficult growing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, well, I'll say this: in the Northwest, I don't know how it is in Southern Oregon, but in the Northwest, a lot of people use laurels, English laurels, as hedge plants.
Yeah.
And this drives me crazy because an English laurel is a tree. It is a tree. It's a broadleaf tree. It's a broadleaf evergreen tree, which is very pretty. If you ever see one as a tree, it's beautiful.
Mhm.
But nobody grows it as a broadleaf evergreen tree. They grow it as a hedge. And there's hedges all over that you constantly have to trim. It wants to be big. People want to make it small. It wants to be big. People want to make it small, And so people spend their whole lives hedging and doing all this stuff with ladders and all this stuff. And the thing just gets fatter and bigger, wider and wider. And it's just sort of like, I like if I was queen, and I could like wave a wand or something and outlaw laurels as hedges, that's what I would do.
Right.
Because they're voracious too. They grow everywhere and they're very hard to get rid of once you have them.
Yeah.
They do produce berries, and they do kind of have a musky scent, which is interesting. So, I mean, I guess they have redeeming qualities and they are very pretty. But like I said, I see them all the time as hedges and that kind of like, that's a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
It's not actually the plant, but I guess how the plant is used.
Right.
Similarly, bamboo is just such a messy plant that doesn't have very many redeeming qualities. I mean, nothing against bamboo people, okay? I mean, like that's
Yeah.
cool if you like it, but it runs like crazy.
Oh my gosh.
They
Yeah.
have a barrier.
Yeah.
Rats love it because it's a lot of cover. And mostly people, it's very interesting because people will plant it as a privacy screen, but then
Yeah.
after a few years, it'll grow up and most of the foliage is at the top and it's just
Yeah.
a bunch of sticks. So it's not really privacy anymore,
Yeah. And then you got to worry about your neighbors too, because now your neighbors are growing them. Because like you said, they'll run and they'll just go they'll just keep going out and out and out and out. And they don't really get themselves contained unless, of course, you're growing them in the more southern climates and where it's a bit warmer and you can kind of keep them contained a little bit better. But in the Pacific Northwest, I have several friends up in that Seattle area who had bamboo, and it just gets really crazy. And it's so hard to like walk around when you got these little bamboo shoots trying to pop up everywhere. You're either tripping over them or,
Yeah. I mean, I've had situations where they grow through a neighbor's driveway, the cracks in the driveway,
Right.
I mean,
They'll find their way.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. I
crazy.
mean, I would love to experience, like in Asia, some of these big, huge
Yeah.
bamboo forests. I would
Yes.
love to go and check that sort of stuff out. I think
Yeah.
in that sort of sense, it would be great. But
Yes.
as like you were saying, if you're just trying to grow it as like a privacy edge, or you just want to put it in a little spot in your garden, then it's, again, they just run too much. And again, not really any redeeming qualities, as you said. So I could definitely
Right.
agree about bamboo for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, we could go on all day about about pest plants like buttercups or
Yeah.
that like weedy plants.
Right.
But I mean, in terms of plants that I won't grow, I mean, I kind of find a lot of redeeming qualities in most things. I mean,
Yeah.
even like a blue star juniper, which is, that really icy blue juniper, which is very common or can be common. I think that's a great plant, especially to design other foliage colored things off of. So I don't have too many, I'm not that picky. I guess I don't grow red flowering plants or yellow flowering plants. Those are two things that aren't really in the palette in my backyard.
Right.
They're just they're too bold for my personality, I guess. I tend to purple, orange, magenta, blue, that type of thing.
All right. Okay, so let's actually real quick, I wanted to ask you again too, what kind of inspires you? I mean, I'm sure you started gardening and you were learning things and, through going to school for horticulture and all of that, but what inspires you now to become an author and start writing books on all these plants and different experiences that you had in the garden?
Well, I, being a gardener, when I was working, I would have time off in winter. And so I started, when I was in tech, I was working as an editor, a content manager type of person. And so I've always been, and that's what I went to school for in college. And so I've always been a writer and then I became a gardener. And so in winter, when I had time off, I started contributing little gardening articles to little sort of local publications and gardening websites and that type of thing. And then, it just kind of grew from there. But, I mean, the things that, the thing that inspired me to talk about gardening, I mean, I guess it was really just, what is it? I mean, it's just there's so much joy that I got from gardening that I wanted to share that, you know. It's
Yeah.
really fun, you know, and in addition to being relaxing and creative and being having good exercise and stuff and being rich for the human senses, it's just plain fun. Like
Yeah.
I just think it's a great way to play. You know, one thing I talk about in the book is the importance of play. That's one of the leisure, the 7 strategies
Yeah.
that happiness researchers say you need to do. You need to play. And really, when you think about gardening, gardening is the ultimate playtime, right? Because you're
Hmm.
experimenting, it's not high stakes. You know, nobody's going to get fired or lose their house because, you know, you
Yeah.
planted, you know, something, you know, in the wrong place or something. So I guess I just love that gardening is just it's just such a great thing to play and experiment with. And I started writing. I kind of transitioned from writing nonfiction art, like how-to stuff, into writing, coming up with stories about plants that hadn't existed before. So I really started writing fiction, and I first wrote a book called The Forgetting Flower, which was about where I kind of realized I kind of was asking myself the question, what would happen? Like all these plants smell great, right? And like jasmine or gardenias and so on. What would happen
Hmm.
if there was a plant that had a scent that could be harmful or dangerous?
Oh,
How would that
yeah.
work? And who would use it, and what would that scenario be? And so I created a story about a plant where if you inhaled the scent, you would forget the last thing you thought of or the last memory you had,
Oh,
and
wow.
built a story, a thriller, basically a literary thriller about that, about a woman who inherits this plant from her sister and has to take care of it. But every time she has to take care of it, she has to put on a gas mask. she, she has to keep it in a little, sorry, Edwardian case, you know,
Yeah.
because if it blooms, it's going to emit a gas that will make her pass out.
Yeah.
So she has to go through all this stuff. She has to hide. She hides it in the back of her store. She only checks on it, like I said, with this gas mask, and keeps it very contained. But then a friend of hers who knows about the plant ends up dying, and
Yeah.
she isn't sure whether she caused that or the plant did or what's going on. And she ends up getting involved with mobsters and people who want these flowers to sell on the black market. So anyway, that was the first story I had come up with, and I ended up traditionally publishing that book. I published a follow up about a speculative apple that
Right.
was a medicinal apple, and then I ended up doing another story in Provence. And then I wrote Leaf Your Troubles because it was the pandemic, and
Yeah.
I was sitting around, and my friend who is a book editor said, "Hey, you want to write that book about plants and mental health you've always thought about?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"I guess so. I'm not doing anything else."
Right.
So we ended up kind of working on Leaf Your Troubles, and then I published that. So that's kind of been my journey with writing, and kind of that's my mission, is to kind of talk about the wonders of plants through my writing. So
Yeah. Really awesome too. Really, I love the book, and I can't remember exactly how it came up or this and that, but too, I give a little bit of a plug to one of my favorite podcasts from the Pacific Northwest called TBTL.
yes,
Yes, and I can't remember how it was mentioned on their show, but I remember them talking about, yeah, mentioning your name and this book, and I knew that, well, that just fits me perfectly. I've got to go check that out. So, so I want to give a little plug out to them. In fact, I got a little, or this way right here, a little thing that says 10. So I'm a TBTL
nice,
10, and
yes,
have been since for many many years. But every now and then there comes a little piece of gold that comes out of there that really pertains to me. And when I heard about this book, it was one I knew that I had to get out and read for sure, because that it's one, as I mentioned, it's one of those things that from the very beginning of my gardening experience was the wonder of that discovery of how growing a garden can be can can be a de-stressor, can help relieve some of those things that are going on in our lives and all of that too. So I love to talk about that whenever I can. So it's been really awesome to have you on our show to be able to talk about all of these sort of things. And again, too, I really recommend everybody to go out and get this book, read this book. There's so much cool stuff in here. And again, like I said, I think one of the really cool things is not only do you talk about all of these sort of aspects of the, you know, stress and all that stuff, but you give people solutions. And you
Yes.
give people activities and things that you can just get out and do, simple things, more complex things, just all sorts of things that we can do to you know, de-stress our lives through gardening and growing plants.
Yeah, I really tried to make it so that even people who don't garden could go out and find, you know, immerse themselves in nature somehow, either through public gardens, public parks, hiking, you know, anything like that. You don't have to even garden to get the benefits of this. You just have to make it a practice to make sure
Yeah.
you get your green leisure in every week, you know?
Yeah. Yes, it's great. It's a really important thing for, you know, all of us out there, no matter where we are, no matter what our lives are like, you know, as we mentioned, you know, whether it's a stressful job, stressful family, or just the world stressing you out, you know, get out into a garden, find the relief from all of that. Find your serenity space or your green leisure lounge, as you talk about in the book, and you know, and get the benefits from growing plants and all of that. Now, is there any advice or any sort of things that you'd like to give gardeners or anything like that that we could leave gardeners with here?
Um, well, I thought Katie was really great when she said that, you know, just try and not be afraid to fail. I think that's a
Yeah.
really great thing. But what I guess I want people to think about in terms of like just sort of see kind of how they view plants, like their mindset. So kind of I want people to um, kind of see plants as your friend and see
Yeah.
like that plants can help you. Plants are your first home. So they're waiting for you. They're waiting to help heal you in whatever
Yeah.
way is right for you. And that can be, like I said, gardening or not. So just to remember that plants can heal you and to spend time in plants a little bit every week, every day, even better.
Yeah.
As a way to help you relax and not work so hard. So,
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Awesome. So you have a website?
yes, it's Karen Hugg, Hugg at just.com.
Awesome, awesome. So you can go check that out. We'll have a link down below in the description so you can go check out her website. Go find her book, Leave Your Troubles Behind. I tell you what, you're going to enjoy this book. It's really worth purchasing. And again, Karen, thank you so much for taking your time out of your Saturday and joining with us here on our Let's Get Growing show.
You bet. Thank you so much, Enoch. Thanks to a 10 helping a fellow 10.
That's right. Awesome. I love it. Thank you. Awesome. Awesome. What a really great conversation. Again, like I said, too, is something that I try to really, you know, talk about a lot when I'm, you know, doing either videos or again in some of these interviews that we're doing here on the Let's Get Growing show, is really talking about the importance of gardening for mental therapy, physical therapy, as we also talked about too. There's just so much that gardening has to offer, and some of those things that we discover that we didn't really know when we were getting into growing plants, you know, like what you know, what it can contribute to our lives overall, you know. And I think it's really one of the best things that I've gotten out of gardening is that again, to be able to de-stress from some of those really stressful, you know, situations in our lives, again, whether it's you know, work, home, the world, all sorts of things can be troubling and can kind of weigh down on us. And to be able to get into our gardens and to be able to use our gardens as kind of a therapeutic measure towards dealing with all that stuff is really great. And that's one of the best things I think gardens have to offer, next to all of the food, or again, we talked about fragrances, flowers, the view we get from our garden and all of that too, So again, thank you to Karen for joining with us and sharing with all of us the great things that she has in her book. And I'll also mention again to go down and check the description below for that website. Go get this book here, Leave Your Troubles Behind. You won't regret it at all. So I want to thank you all again so much for joining with us this week. And one of the things I want to mention too is that we are sponsored by Ivy Organic. So Ivy Organics is got some great products at ivyorganics.com. You get some fertilizers, some 301 plant guard, all these really great things that they have there in their shop. And be sure to use our promo code GROW10 to get 10% off of everything that you can buy there in their shop. And like I said too, it's a great way to support Let's Get Growing by supporting our sponsor as well too. And also again to go check out our website at letsgetgrowing.live, and there you can find out about all of our past and upcoming shows, as well as signing up for our newsletter, or hit that Get Involved tab and maybe submit one of those audience introductions or a garden story that we can share in a future episode. So I hope that you all have enjoyed our show that we have today. We had a couple of really great guests, a couple of really great conversations. And, if you really love gardening, then this is the place to join with us each Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 2 p.m. on the East Coast, and have some fun and enjoy talking about growing all sorts of things and all things gardening. And next week we'll have on our show with us a really good friend of mine. He's a radio and television host of Things Green. We're going to have with us Nick Fedoroff joining our show to talk about all sorts of different gardening subjects. And, this would be a real good time to join with us and ask some garden questions. Nick's got lots of gardening knowledge. He's been in the industry for a long time. Really looking forward to that conversation. So be sure to come and join with us next week, next Saturday, here on Let's Get Growing. So from all of us here, have a great week, and we'll see you next Saturday.